Admiral Reed stood at the observation deck of the Imperial scout vessel Starseeker, his four eyes fixed on the blue-green planet spinning slowly on the main screen. After 300 years of exploring the galaxy's outer rim, this was the first time he had felt genuine unease about a primitive world. "Admiral, the initial scan results are ready," announced First Officer Banks, her silver uniform gleaming under the ship's lights. She handed him a data tablet, her expression troubled. Reed studied the numbers, then read them again. Something wasn't right. "This can't be correct," he muttered. "Run the scans again." The planet, designated as Earth by its inhabitants, showed energy readings typical of a Level 2 civilization, barely capable of reaching their own moon. Yet the thermal and radiation signatures told a different story. The surface was covered with what appeared to be military installations, weapons testing grounds, and training facilities. More concerning were the numerous underwater structures and orbital satellites that seemed designed specifically for warfare. "Sir," Banks spoke up, "the xenoanthropologists have submitted their preliminary report. You might want to look at this." The report was unusual, to say the least. Unlike the 300 other species that made up the Galactic Empire, these humans had developed their technology primarily through military advancement rather than peaceful exploration or trade. Their history was a constant cycle of warfare, with periods of peace being mere preparations for the next conflict. "Fascinating," Reed mumbled. "They've spent more resources on weapons development than space exploration. It's almost as if they're preparing for something." The bridge crew worked quietly around him, monitoring the planet's communications and mapping its defense systems. The Empire had established first contact with hundreds of primitive worlds before, and the protocol was always the same. Demonstrate overwhelming power, establish diplomatic relations, and gradually integrate them into the Empire's peaceful civilization. But Earth was different. Their weapons, while primitive, were purely military in design. Most civilizations adapted civilian technology for defense when needed, but everything about human military technology was purpose-built for warfare. "Sir," called out the sensor officer, "we've detected their primitive AI systems attempting to probe our shields. They know we're here." Reed smiled. Most primitive worlds would be in panic by now, their leaders hiding in bunkers. Instead, Earth's military forces were mobilizing with surprising efficiency. Fighter aircraft were taking off from bases across the planet, and their primitive space vessels were changing orbit to defensive positions. "Interesting response time," Reed noted. "How long did it take them to mobilize?" "Less than 20 minutes, sir," Banks replied. That's faster than some of our own colony worlds." The xenoanthropologist team requested an urgent meeting with Reed. Their leader, Dr. White, was usually calm and analytical, but today she seemed genuinely concerned. "Admiral, we strongly advise against standard first contact protocols," she insisted. "These humans, they're different. Their entertainment, their games, even their children's toys, everything revolves around conflict and warfare. They don't just practice war. They study it, perfect it, and even celebrate it." Reed dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. "Every primitive species appears violent at first, Doctor. The Empire has never failed to establish peaceful contact in its 10,000-year history. These humans will learn, just like all the others." As he issued orders for the diplomatic vessel to prepare for first contact, Reed failed to notice a small detail in the sensor readings. The humans weren't just mobilizing their military. They were moving their civilians to shelter, their industries to emergency production, and their governments to secure locations. They weren't panicking. They were following pre-existing protocols for planetary defense. In the coming days, the Empire would learn a harsh lesson. There's a vast difference between a peaceful species that learns to fight when necessary and a warrior species that has spent its entire history preparing for a fight they knew would eventually come. The first shots of humanity's war for independence hadn't been fired yet, but Earth was ready. They had always been ready. And Admiral Reed, despite his centuries of experience, had just made the biggest mistake in Imperial history. He had assumed that primitive technology meant primitive warfare. He couldn't have been more wrong. The Imperial diplomatic vessel Peacebearer descended through Earth's atmosphere, its golden hull gleaming in the morning sun. 6 escort ships followed in perfect formation, their weapons powered down as per first contact protocols. Ambassador Green stood at the command center, adjusting his ceremonial robes one final time. "We're receiving multiple warnings from their military installations," reported the communications officer. "They're demanding we land at a designated location in a place called Nevada." Green nodded. "Follow their instructions. Show them we come in peace." The humans had cleared a massive area in the desert, surrounded by what the Empire considered primitive but numerous anti-aircraft weapons. Military vehicles formed a wide perimeter, and aircraft circled overhead like hungry predators. As the Peacebearer touched down, Green noticed something odd about the human formation. Why are they positioned as if expecting an attack? He wondered aloud. Most species usually sent welcoming committees with gifts and celebrations for first contact. The ship's ramp lowered, and Green led his delegation onto Earth soil. A group of human officials approached, led by a stern-faced man in a dark suit. Behind them stood soldiers in combat gear, their weapons held ready but not aimed. "Welcome to Earth," the man in the suit said flatly. "I'm Director Wilson of the Global Defense Council. You're currently surrounded by enough firepower to level a small country. Please keep that in mind during our discussion." Green blinked in surprise. In 10,000 years of Imperial diplomacy, no species had ever opened first contact with a threat. "We come in peace," he began his standard greeting. "The Galactic Empire wishes to—" "Empire?" Wilson interrupted, his eyes narrowing. "Interesting choice of words. Let me be clear. Earth doesn't bow to empires." The tension in the air grew thick. Green's escorts shifted uncomfortably, while the human soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons. "Perhaps we've had a misunderstanding." Green tried again. "The Empire brings peace, prosperity, and advancement to all its members. We've guided hundreds of worlds to submission." Wilson finished. "We've studied your ships since they entered our system. Your peaceful vessels carry enough weapons to glass our cities. Was that meant to intimidate us?" Before Green could respond, alarms blared from both human and Imperial installations. High above, one of the escort ships had detected what it thought was a weapons lock from a human fighter and had activated its shields. A standard defensive protocol, but one that appeared as weapon charging to human sensors. The next few moments descended into chaos. Human fighters, already on edge, opened fire on the escort ship. The Imperial vessel's automated defense systems responded, shooting down 2 human aircraft. More human fighters scrambled from nearby bases, and the remaining escort ships activated their combat protocols. "Stand down," Green shouted into his communicator, but it was too late. The humans had already launched a full defensive response, and the Imperial ships were following standard combat procedures. Director Wilson was already running back to his vehicle, shouting orders into a radio. "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. Implementation of Protocol Omega. All units engage." Green watched in horror as the sky filled with human aircraft and missiles. His escort ships, despite their advanced technology, found themselves swarmed by hundreds of human fighters appearing from hidden bases. The humans weren't fighting with any recognizable military doctrine. Each unit seemed to operate independently, adapting their tactics on the fly. "Get back to the ship." Green's security chief pulled him toward the ramp as human tanks emerged from camouflaged positions, their guns tracking the Peacebearer. As the diplomatic vessel lifted off under heavy fire, Green realized the Empire had made a catastrophic error. They had assumed Earth would behave like every other primitive world, grateful for contact, eager to join the Empire, and willing to submit to superior technology. Instead, they had found a species that treated first contact as a potential invasion, had prepared for it for centuries, and had somehow hidden their true military capabilities from Imperial scans. The Peace Bearer escaped into orbit, its golden hull now scared by human weapons. But as Green looked down at the blue planet below, he knew this was just the beginning. The Empire had never failed to subdue a primitive world. But then again, they had never encountered humans before. Admiral Reed watched from his command ship as the pacification fleet emerged from hyperspace near Earth's moon. 100 warships, each capable of destroying a small continent, moved into attack formation. It was the standard response to any primitive world that resisted imperial rule. In the Empire's long history, no civilization had ever survived more than a day against such overwhelming force. "Send the surrender demand," Reed ordered. "Give them 1 hour to comply." The response came back in just 5 minutes. It was a simple video message showing the human military officer burning a printed copy of the surrender demand. In the background, they could see hundreds of soldiers cheering. Reed sighed. "Very well. Commence the standard attack pattern." The Imperial fleet split into 5 groups, each targeting major population centers. Their tactical computers had already identified Earth's largest cities. This was normally when primitive worlds realized their helplessness and surrendered. But something was wrong. The human cities appeared empty. "Sir," a sensor officer called out, "we're detecting massive energy signatures from their oceans." Suddenly, the sea itself seemed to erupt. Hidden underwater bases launched thousands of missiles. They weren't the primitive nuclear weapons the Empire had detected earlier. These were advanced electromagnetic pulse weapons, specifically designed to target Imperial shield frequencies. "Impossible," Reed shouted as 30 Imperial ships lost power simultaneously. Their technology level. They hid their true weapons. The disabled Imperial ships began falling from orbit, their crews evacuating in panic. But the humans weren't finished. Small, stealthy craft emerged from hidden mountain bases, moving faster than Imperial tracking systems could follow. They carried boarding teams. "Sir, they're using some kind of primitive but effective hacking technology," reported the communications officer. "They're breaking into our computer systems using methods we've never seen before. It's like they spent years preparing for exactly this kind of fight." Reed watched in horror as human soldiers, wearing simple but effective spacesuits, breached the hulls of disabled Imperial ships. Their combat tactics were unlike anything in Imperial records. They fought in small, independent teams, each capable of making tactical decisions without orders from above. When one approach failed, they immediately tried another. "Launch fighters," Reed commanded. "Push them back." The Imperial fighters were technically superior in every way. But the humans had studied warfare for thousands of years. They knew that superior technology didn't guarantee victory. Their own fighters attacked in swarms, sacrificing themselves to protect their boarding parties. They seemed to have no fear of death. "Admiral," his tactical officer's voice shook. "The humans, they're capturing our ships. They're learning to operate them within minutes." Reed couldn't believe what he was seeing. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were adapting Imperial technology in the middle of battle. A captured Imperial cruiser, now partially painted with human military markings, was already turning its weapons against its former fleet. "Sir, we've lost contact with attack groups 3 and 4, reported his communications officer. "The humans are using our own ships to attack the others." In just 6 hours, the mighty pacification fleet was in chaos. 40 ships had been disabled by EMP weapons. 20 more had been captured by human boarding parties. The rest were scattered, trying to defend against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. "Full retreat," Reed finally ordered, his voice heavy with disbelief. "Get us out of this system." As the remaining Imperial ships flowed into hyperspace, Reed looked at the battle reports in shock. The Empire had lost more ships in 6 hours than in the last 1,000 years combined. But it wasn't just the losses that disturbed him. It was how they lost. The humans had planned for this. Their primitive technology had been a carefully crafted deception. They had studied the Imperial ships the moment they entered the system and developed specific countermeasures. Every human tactic showed signs of centuries of military thinking. "Send word to Imperial Command," Reed said quietly. Tell them we found something new. A species that doesn't just fight wars, they live for them. And may the stars help us all, because they're not going to stay in their system for long." Behind him, Earth's defenders were already beginning to study their captured Imperial ships, preparing for their next battle. The Empire had made a terrible mistake, and the galaxy would never be the same. 2 weeks after the failed pacification attempt, the Imperial War Council gathered for the first time in 500 years. The meeting room was filled with tension as Admiral Reed presented his report on the Earth campaign. "The humans," Reed explained, pointing to the holographic display, "are unlike any species we encountered. Most civilizations develop technology through peaceful means: medicine, trade, exploration. Humans developed everything through warfare." He showed images of captured human weapons. "Look at their designs. Their ships aren't converted cargo vessels or modified science platforms like ours. They're pure weapons, built only for war. Even their civilian vehicles can be quickly converted for military use." The council members watched in silence as Reed played video recordings from the battle. Human soldiers fought with unexpected skill, using tactics that seemed to change every few minutes. When one approach failed, they immediately tried something new. "But surely their primitive technology can't stand against our full might," said General Stone, one of the oldest council members. "We should send the main fleet." Reed shook his head. "They've already learned to use our captured ships. But they're not just copying our technology. They're improving it. Look at this." The hologram showed a captured Imperial cruiser. The humans had stripped away its elegant design and added thick armor plates. The ship's beautiful golden hull was now painted in dark camouflage patterns. Weapon systems that the Empire used for self-defense had been modified for aggressive combat. "They turned one of our diplomatic vessels into something they call a battleship in just 3 days," Reed continued. "They don't care about beauty or comfort. Everything serves a combat purpose." A new alert flashed across the room's screens. Reports were coming in from Imperial border stations. Human ships had appeared at 3 different locations, hundreds of light years from Earth. "Impossible." General Stone stood up. "They couldn't have mastered faster than light travel so quickly." "They didn't have to," Reed explained grimly. "They captured our navigation computers intact. And unlike us, they don't spend years studying new technology before using it. They learned just enough to make it work, then immediately use it in combat." The reports got worse. The humans weren't just attacking Imperial stations. They were freeing worlds that had recently joined the Empire. Their message was simple: join us or stay neutral. But the age of empires is over. Their ground combat is even more surprising. Reed continued. "We found records of something they call guerrilla warfare. They don't fight in organized formations like civilized species. They hide, strike from shadows, then disappear. Our troops are trained to fight armies, not invisible enemies who blend in with civilians." More alerts flashed. Human ships had been spotted near the Empire's main shipyards. Somehow, they had already mapped key Imperial military locations. "They're using our own intelligence networks against us," Reed explained. "When they captured our ships, they also got our codes and protocols. But instead of just reading our messages, they're feeding us false information. We can't tell which reports are real anymore." The council chamber erupted in argument. Some wanted to send the entire Imperial fleet to crush Earth. Others wanted to negotiate peace before humans spread further into Imperial space. "You don't understand." Reed's voice cut through the noise. "Humans don't fight like us. We fight to maintain order. They fight to win, completely and totally. Look at their history. Every major advancement they made came from warfare. Their medical technology developed to save soldiers. Their space program started as a military race. Even their civilian internet began as a military communication system." He showed one final image: a human child playing with a toy spaceship, making pretend explosion sounds. "This is what we're facing," Reed said quietly. "A species that teaches war to its children through games. That turns everything it touches into a weapon. That has spent its entire history preparing for enemies like us." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. The Empire hadn't just found another primitive species to civilize. They had awakened something that had been preparing for this moment for thousands of years. And now humanity was loose in the galaxy, armed with Imperial technology and a mastery of warfare that made the Empire's military look like beginners. The age of peaceful expansion was over. The age of human warfare had begun. Intelligence Officer Marcus sat in his dimly lit office aboard the Imperial Command Station, surrounded by screens showing Earth's history. After 3 weeks of studying human records, he hadn't slept in days. What he discovered kept him awake, filled with a growing sense of dread. "Computer, show me their entertainment records again," he commanded, rubbing his tired eyes. The screens filled with images of human movies, games, and books. Almost all of them involved conflict or war. A soft knock on his door interrupted his research. "Enter," he called out. Admiral Reed stepped into the office, looking equally exhausted. "Tell me you found something useful, Marcus. The humans have taken 3 more systems since yesterday." Marcus nodded slowly, gesturing to the screens. "Sir, we've been looking at this all wrong. We thought they were just good at fighting. The truth is much worse." He pointed to different screens showing human history. "Look at their calendar. In the last 100 years alone, they've had 2 wars they called World Wars. Not planetary defense. They fought these wars against themselves." Reed sat down heavily in a chair. Against themselves. Why? Resources, territory, politics, religion. "They'll fight for any reason," Marcus explained. "But that's not the frightening part. Look at what happened after each war." The screen showed graphs and charts. Their technology jumped forward dramatically during and after each conflict. World War I gave them aircraft. World War II gave them rockets, computers, and atomic weapons. Every major war pushed their technology forward by decades. "That explains how they're learning our technology so quickly," Reed muttered. Marcus nodded. "They don't see technology as something to study carefully like we do. They see it as something to use immediately. If it works, keep it. If it fails, try something else. They call it field testing." He pulled up more images. "And look at this. They're children's toys. Toy soldiers, toy weapons, games about war. They're training their young to think about combat before they can even walk. Their most popular sports are all about territory control or simulated combat." The screens showed human movies next. Even their entertainment is about war. They make thousands of stories about fighting aliens, fighting each other, fighting monsters. They imagine wars that haven't even happened yet. "Are they all violent then?" Reed asked. "Surely they must have some peaceful members of their species." Marcus shook his head. "That's another problem. They're not mindless warriors. They create beautiful art, music, and literature. They can be incredibly kind and peaceful, but they never forget how to fight. Even their most peaceful citizens know basic military concepts. They call it common knowledge." He showed footage of civilian humans fighting the Imperial forces. "Look how quickly their civilians support their military. They don't panic like other species. They organize, they adapt, they help their soldiers. It's like their entire species has basic military training." Reed watched the footage in silence. On one screen, human civilians were helping soldiers set up defenses. On another, human scientists were rapidly studying captured Imperial technology. On a third, human children were practicing in simulators, learning to fly captured Imperial fighters. "There's more," Marcus continued grimly. "They have something they call action movies, entertainment about fighting and war. In many of these stories, a smaller, less advanced force defeats a powerful empire. They've been imagining this exact scenario for centuries. They're just following plans they've already made in their stories. A new alert flashed across the screens. The humans had taken another system, this time without firing a shot. The local population had risen up and joined them willingly after hearing about their victories against the Empire. We're not just fighting their soldiers, Marcus concluded. We're fighting their entire culture. Everything they've built, every story they've told, every game they've played. It's all been preparing them for this moment. They've spent their entire history getting ready for a war against a more powerful enemy. Reed stood up slowly, his face pale. How do you fight an enemy that's been preparing for you before they even knew you existed? Marcus looked at the screens, where more reports of human victories were appearing. That's just it, sir. I don't think we can. They're not just fighting a war. They're living out their greatest stories. And in their stories, the Empire always loses. The room fell silent as another alert showed more Imperial systems joining the human cause. Humanity wasn't just winning the war. They were changing the very nature of galactic civilization. And they were doing it with a smile, finally living out the battles they had been dreaming of for centuries. The Imperial Senate chamber was in an uproar. Senators from 100 worlds shouted over each other as the latest battle reports flashed on the giant screens. 30 Imperial systems had fallen to the humans in just 1 month. Order. We will have order. The Senate leader's voice boomed across the chamber. As the noise died down, he turned to the military delegation. General Stone, explain how a primitive species is defeating our best forces. Stone stepped forward, his usual confidence gone. The humans, they don't fight like anyone we've ever seen. We just lost the Centauri sector to a force 1/10 the size of our fleet. He played a recording from the battle. The Senate watched in shock as a small group of human ships, painted in dark colors, appeared from behind a moon. Instead of facing the Imperial fleet directly, they attacked supply lines, fuel stations, and communication relays. Within hours, the mighty Imperial fleet was scattered and blind. They call it tactical warfare, Stone explained. They never attack where we expect. While we protect our major bases, they strike at small outposts. When we guard our outposts, they raid our supply lines. When we defend our supplies, they steal our intelligence data. A senator stood up. But surely our superior technology means nothing. Stone interrupted. They captured some of our best ships in the first battle. But instead of copying them exactly, they're changing them. Look at this. The screen showed an Imperial battleship modified by humans. Gone were the beautiful designs and comfortable crew quarters. Extra weapons covered the hull. The engines were pushed beyond safe limits. It was ugly but deadly effective. They're taking our technology and removing everything they consider unnecessary. Stone continued. No luxury, no comfort, just pure military function. And their soldiers, they're something else entirely. New footage played. Human soldiers fought on despite injuries that would stop any other species. They used tactics that seemed to change every minute. When their weapons ran out, they used captured ones. When those ran out, they fought with their hands. We found this in their military records, Stone said grimly. They have a tradition called the last stand. Fighting to the death against impossible odds. Most species see this as a tragedy. Humans write songs about it. They make movies celebrating it. They teach their children about famous last stands in school. The Senate chamber fell silent as they absorbed this information. More battle reports kept appearing on the screens. Another Imperial fleet had surrendered without a fight. 3 more systems had joined the humans voluntarily. Their psychological warfare is even more disturbing, Stone added. When we try to demoralize them, they laugh. They make jokes about their own possible defeat. They have something called gallows humor. Finding fun in hopeless situations. How do you break the spirit of soldiers who laugh at death? A military psychologist stepped forward. We've studied their combat behavior. They have a concept called fighting spirit that we've never seen before. When we destroy their supplies, they improvise. When we cut their communications, each unit keeps fighting independently. When we kill their officers, common soldiers take command without hesitation. The screens now showed human soldiers teaching their tactics to rebels on Imperial worlds. Former Imperial citizens were learning to fight like humans, spreading their warfare methods across the galaxy. We're not just losing battles, Stone concluded. We're losing the very thing that made our empire strong. The belief that our way of life is superior. The humans aren't just defeating us. They're showing the galaxy a new way to fight, a new way to resist. Every world they free becomes a new source of soldiers eager to learn their ways. The Senate leader stood slowly. Can we stop them? Stone looked at the latest reports coming in. Human fleets were appearing in more systems each day. Their captured Imperial ships, modified for pure combat effectiveness, were proving more dangerous than the originals. Their methods of warfare were spreading like wildfire among conquered populations. No, he said finally, we can't stop them. Because they're not fighting for territory or resources. They're fighting for something they've dreamed about for centuries. The chance to prove themselves against a mighty empire. And in their stories, their games, their very culture, the rebels always win. The Senate chamber grew quiet as the truth sank in. They hadn't just found a new species, they had awakened an ancient warrior culture that had spent its entire history preparing for this moment. And now, the galaxy would never be the same. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was packed with representatives from every spacefaring race in the known galaxy. They had gathered to hear the Empire's unprecedented emergency broadcast. On the main platform, Admiral Reed stood before the assembled species, his face showing the wear of 3 months of constant defeat. Let this warning be recorded in every language, on every world. Reed began, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. Stay away from the Sol system. Do not approach Earth. Do not attempt contact with humans. Murmurs spread through the crowd. The mighty empire, which had ruled for 10,000 years, was admitting defeat. We thought they were primitive, Reed continued. We were wrong. The humans don't just fight. They redefine warfare itself. In 3 months, they have taken half our territory. But more importantly, they have changed how war is fought in our galaxy forever. The screens around the hall showed footage from recent battles. Human ships, once captured Imperial vessels now modified beyond recognition, moved with deadly grace. Their crews performed maneuvers that Imperial safety protocols would never allow, pushing machines beyond their designed limits. Look at how they fight, Reed pointed to the screens. No formation is sacred to them. No tactic is too dishonorable. No technology is too precious to risk. They modify everything they capture, strip away what they call unnecessary features, and create pure weapons of war. He showed images of human soldiers teaching their methods to former Imperial citizens. They're not just winning battles, they're spreading their knowledge. Every world they free becomes a training ground. Every species they meet learns their ways of war. They call it tactical evolution, the constant improvement of combat methods. The assembled representatives watched in silence as more footage played. Human civilians turning their tools into weapons. Human children practicing in combat simulators. Human engineers rebuilding Imperial technology with brutal efficiency. We tried to understand their weakness, Reed continued. We studied their history, their culture, their entertainment. But everything about them revolves around conflict and competition. They turn games into war simulations. They make their music about battle. They teach their children stories of great victories against impossible odds. New alerts flashed across the screens. 3 more Imperial fleets had surrendered. The humans weren't even fighting anymore. Worlds were joining them voluntarily, attracted by their promise of freedom and their proven ability to defeat the Empire. This is not just a warning about their military might. Reed's voice grew more intense. This is a warning about their nature. They don't fight for resources. They have everything they need on their world. They don't fight for territory. They're offering freedom to every world they take. They don't even fight for survival. They were safe in their system. He paused, looking across the silent chamber. They fight because it's who they are, because their entire history is a preparation for war, because every story they tell their children is about overcoming stronger enemies, because every piece of technology they create can be turned into a weapon. The screens now showed the latest images from Earth. Humans were building new shipyards, teaching their ways to aliens, spreading their influence across the stars. They moved with the confidence of a species that had finally found its place in the universe. The Empire hereby acknowledges the independence of Earth and all systems that have joined them, Reeve announced formally. We will withdraw from their claimed space. We advise all spacefaring races to do the same. As the representatives began to leave, many already drafting messages to their homeworlds, Reed added one final warning. Remember this day. Remember what happened when we thought we could civilize the humans. They didn't need our civilization. They needed our technology. And now that they have it, they will never stop improving it, never stop adapting it, never stop using it in ways we never imagined. The Great Hall emptied slowly, its occupants deep in thought. The age of the Empire was ending. A new age was beginning. An age shaped by a species that had spent its entire existence preparing for this moment. In orbit around Earth, human engineers were already at work, improving Imperial designs, teaching their methods to eager students from 100 worlds. They had waited thousands of years for the stars. Now that they had reached them, the galaxy would never be the same. The humans were here to stay, and war itself would never be the same again.